if you remember from some footage in Sri Lanka from the Adam Sapphire documentary, you mentioned something, well, a phrase that you don't like to contain knowledge, you like to control it. Can you kind of elaborate on what you meant by that?
It's been some time, brother, since we did, I guess, those sessions. But I think what you're referring to is when I said that statement, what I essentially meant was that I don't like to contain it in secrecy. I like to disseminate knowledge and share it so that we all can kind of become better, become more knowledgeable, and evolve. Evolve our industry, evolve the world of rocks, make the rocks better if we can, acquire more rocks, whatever we can do that leads us on that path. Preserve as much of this material that's provided to us as we can. And my perspective on this is generally the dissemination of knowledge and sharing and not doing what I do in complete secrecy. I understand the perspective where people like to not share for financial incentives and protection. I have just found it for me personally, it doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't resonate with me because of my spiritual belief that our rizq and our naseeb is already dictated, right? Once we accept what God has ordained for us, what we are supposed to get, we're supposed to get. And providing a way for someone else to provide for themselves and their families can be just as rewarding. So if you are able to allow someone to do that and you accept your fate, then there's no reason to hide that knowledge. I'm not telling you to share who all your suppliers are and who your clients are. What I'm saying essentially is that if you understand a new treatment, or if you understand something about stones that's important, without which the dissemination of that information would lead to unnecessary loss or damage, why do it? You understand? And I'll give you a great story of what happened to me in my childhood. Actually thought of this the other day with a video that Saad put up that got me in a little trouble. So I think I was around 17 years old. And at that time, it was one of my earlier trips to Pakistan, and I had acquired a Tourmaline parcel. And this Tourmaline parcel, it was a bicolored parcel that was pink to white. That in and of itself isn't very unique for Afghanistan or Afghani material, which is where it was from. But what was unique was almost the entire parcel was composed of doubly terminated scepters. And I took this parcel and I showed it to someone that I had recommended to me. And I offered it to this gentleman who was an academic and was very involved academically and institutionally. And this gentleman who was much older than me and who I looked at more from the perspective of guidance, made an offer on the parcel that was a fraction of what I felt it was worth from the perspective of rough, because it was all optical. So optical scepters that were bicolored pink and white, tourmaline. So when the offer was made to me, I don't know, I think it was $10 or $15 per gram. I went home and I took out my carbide tip towel nippers and I pretty much snapped every scepter in half. And I did this to provide more blocky material for better yield. And I could sell the rough stones for 4 times what I was offered, 3 or 4 times what I was offered for the crystals. Just didn't make any sense to me. So I was, all right, let me just clip them. It's really disheartening to think about this now. But I went and I clipped the whole parcel, and I think at that time I did manage to sell all of those stones. Sometime later, I ran across the same gentleman, who had offered, the $15 or $10 per gram. And he said, "Hey, Farooq, what happened with that parcel?" I told him, "Man, I clipped all of them." And he said, "What? You did what?" I said, "I clipped all of them. I sold them as rough." Then you could see the shock that this gentleman, conveyed. But I mean, the reality was that it was worth much more as rough based on what was conveyed to me from this gentleman. And that essentially was a very significant lesson in my life. I don't like to see people go through that experience. So if I can prevent people from doing that, I try my best to do so. So this is where that kind of comes from. I don't like to contain knowledge and keep it in secret.
Yeah, and I've never met anyone like you in terms of how you love connecting people together. You love bringing different people together from different worlds, even if it can cost you at sometimes, because it can as well, or many people can perceive it too.
That's heavy. 100%. You're correct. And I hate to say it, but I think I have kind of toned that down a bit. I used to be much more open, and the world has become so cutthroat right now. The more you disseminate, I mean, it's just really where people are in your backyard doing the exact same thing. You don't have to do that. There's so many channels to make a living. You don't have to do the identical thing someone else does, you know? And I always have to evolve to stay on top of my game, to stay in touch with the changing markets, whether the center is America or it becomes Europe or it becomes China or Pakistan. I evolve. I evolve to the point sometimes I'm acquiring things in America, selling them in Africa, or acquiring them in part of Africa, selling them in another part, or in Pakistan. It's just this market is so fluid, and my unique experience in probably the largest array of these producing countries gives me a competitive advantage that very few other dealers have. And I generally don't find it threatening when I share information, but there are a few people that have led me to hesitate. It's a negligible, amount of people, but still, there is some hesitation relative to where I used to do it completely, carefree in the past. So, I mean, I, I'll still share information. Don't worry.
We'll call it that.